In any crisis, the laws and rules that once felt like the foundation of a safe society can quickly become obstacles to survival. Under normal conditions, these laws exist to maintain order, protect property, and ensure fairness. But when the world flips upside down, whether from natural disaster, political upheaval, or total infrastructure collapse, those same laws can leave you trapped, hungry, or in danger. Imagine a city under strict curfew after a massive blackout. The streets are patrolled, checkpoints stop movement, and supplies are tightly controlled. In that moment, you might know exactly where you could find clean water or safe food, but it's across a barricade guarded by armed authorities. The lawful choice would be to stay put and hope for help. The survival choice might be to find a way around the blockade, even if it means breaking the rules. History shows countless examples of this. In war zones, occupied cities, or famine-stricken countries, laws have restricted movement, banned certain tools, or even criminalized the gathering of wild food. The reasoning may have made sense on paper, keeping people in designated areas, protecting certain resources. But in practice, these restrictions often left people vulnerable. In moments like that, the ability to recognize when a law no longer serves your survival is critical. It's not about recklessness or rebellion for its own sake. It's about understanding that rules are made for times of order, and when order collapses, so does their ability to protect you. Consider a flood that has cut off your neighborhood. Officials declare certain areas off, limits due to safety concerns. But you know there's a supply warehouse within that zone with food, blankets, and fuel. Waiting for permission could mean waiting until it's too late. In another scenario, think of a wildfire where evacuation routes are dictated by authorities, but you've lived in the area for years and know a shorter, safer back road. If taking that road means ignoring an official order, you have to weigh the risk of legal trouble against the risk of losing your life. This is where survival thinking diverges from everyday thinking. The ability to adapt to changing realities, especially when those realities make old rules dangerous, is one of the most important mental skills you can have. People who survive disasters often have the instinct to question what's being told to them and assess it against what they see with their own eyes. They are willing to bend or break the rules if it means protecting themselves or others. That's not to say laws are meaningless in survival situations. Some still matter greatly, especially those that keep communities from turning against each other entirely. But when a law actively stops you from reaching safety, securing resources, or protecting your loved ones, it becomes a barrier. And in survival, barriers are things you either break through or find a way around. In the end, survival often favors those who understand that in crisis, the rules aren't always on your side. Scavenging has always carried a certain stigma in civilized society, often equated with theft or desperation. In normal times, taking something that doesn't belong to you is illegal, plain and simple. But in a survival situation, especially one where supply lines are broken and stores are abandoned, scavenging can mean the difference between life and death. When disaster strikes and the shelves go bare, the rules about who owns what can become blurred. Picture a city after a massive hurricane, streets flooded, power gone, and food rotting in supermarkets that no one can access because the doors are locked and the owners are gone. Waiting for an official distribution that may never come isn't noble, it's dangerous. In such moments, scavenging becomes a survival tactic, not a crime of greed. There's a key distinction between opportunistic looting and survival scavenging. Looting is about taking valuables for profit or pleasure, like electronics or jewelry, often in the middle of chaos. Survival scavenging is targeted, deliberate, and focused solely on acquiring the essentials: food, water, clothing, medical supplies. It's not about personal gain, it's about staying alive, and sometimes it's about keeping others alive too. After disasters like Hurricane Katrina, countless survivors reported that the only reason they made it through the first few days was because they broke into shuttered stores to get bottled water, baby formula, or batteries for flashlights. Scavenging also requires skill and restraint. It's not just walking into a wrecked building and grabbing whatever's in sight. You have to evaluate the structural safety of the place. Watch for hazards like broken glass, unstable walls, or even desperate people who might view you as competition. You also need the discipline to take only what you can carry and only what you truly need. Every extra item slows you down, makes you a bigger target, and potentially denies someone else the same life-saving chance. In a way, responsible scavenging becomes a form of triage, prioritizing resources based on survival necessity. The law may label scavenging as trespassing or theft, but in a collapsed system where ownership is impossible to enforce and needs are urgent, moral lines shift. If food is rotting in a locked building and people are starving outside, is taking that food truly wrong, or is it the most human thing you can do? In many cultures throughout history, survival during famines or disasters depended entirely on reclaiming abandoned goods, often with a silent understanding that necessity outweighs legality. In the end, scavenging is about adaptability. It's about the courage to make a decision that might be judged harshly in normal times, but is absolutely necessary in extraordinary ones. Those who can do it smartly, safely, and with purpose often outlast those who cling to the hope that help will arrive before their supplies run out. In a true survival situation, scavenging is not just a tactic, it's a lifeline. Bartering in a survival situation is one of those tactics that straddles the line between old-world tradition and desperate necessity. In many regions, it's not technically illegal, but in certain crisis scenarios, especially where governments have declared states of emergency, informal trade can be outlawed, regulated, or heavily policed. Why? Because in times of collapse, authorities often want to control the flow of goods to maintain order, prevent exploitation, and keep vital resources from ending up in the wrong hands. Yet, despite these restrictions, bartering has saved countless lives. When conventional currency becomes worthless and official supply chains crumble. In a survival context, bartering is more than just swapping goods. It's about building trust, creating alliances, and gaining access to what you otherwise couldn't obtain. When cash no longer holds value and debit cards are useless, trade reverts to its most primal form, something for something. A handful of antibiotics might be worth a winter's worth of firewood. A box of ammunition could secure weeks of food. In such a system, value is dictated entirely by need and scarcity, not by printed numbers on paper. Of course, bartering isn't without risks. When laws forbid it, you're operating in a gray zone where getting caught can mean fines, confiscation of goods, or even jail time. But in a true survival emergency, those penalties may be irrelevant compared to the danger of going without. The key is subtlety. Open, public trades attract attention from desperate individuals, opportunistic criminals, or even authorities who want to shut you down. Smart survivors conduct trades quietly, often in neutral territory, and always with a trusted network. One of the most overlooked aspects of bartering is knowing your leverage. In normal life, you might think of luxury items as frivolous, but in a crisis, they can be surprisingly valuable. Coffee, cigarettes, alcohol, or even simple sweets can command high trade value because they bring comfort and normalcy in a chaotic world. That doesn't mean you should prioritize hoarding these over-essentials, but having a stash of item and morale items can be an incredible bargaining chip when someone else desperately wants them. Another survival skill tied to bartering is diversification. Don't put all your trading power into one type of resource. If you only have food to trade, you'll lose bargaining strength when dealing with someone who already has plenty of it. Carry small, varied items: water purification tablets, sewing kits, medical supplies, tools that appeal to different needs. This variety allows you to negotiate from a position of strength, no matter who you're dealing with. At its heart, bartering in a crisis is about adaptability and human connection. It turns isolated survivors into a web of mutual aid even when the law frowns upon it. Yes, in normal times it might be regulated, taxed, or discouraged. But when the world as you know it has shut down, bartering transforms from an outdated tradition into one of the most effective survival tools in your arsenal. It's not just trading, it's trading your way to another day alive. Rainwater harvesting is one of the oldest and most effective methods of securing water in a survival situation, yet in many modern places it's shockingly restricted or outright outlawed. Certain states and municipalities have laws limiting or prohibiting the collection of rainwater, often citing concerns about water rights, contamination risks, or the impact on the local ecosystem. But when a crisis strikes, whether it's a grid failure, drought, or supply chain collapse, those regulations can suddenly feel like a luxury you can't afford to obey. For a survivor, the ability to gather and store rainwater can mean the difference between life and death. In a survival scenario, public water systems may fail without warning. Pumps stop working, pipes burst, and store shelves run dry of bottled water almost instantly. Relying solely on stored water is risky because even a well-stocked supply can run out faster than expected. That's where rainwater harvesting becomes invaluable. With just a few barrels, buckets, or tarps, you can capture gallons of fresh water every time it rains. Even in a modest downpour, a single rooftop can collect hundreds of gallons, enough to sustain a family for weeks if used wisely. The key to making rainwater safe lies in filtration and purification. Collected water should never be consumed directly without treatment, as it can contain dirt, bird droppings, and airborne pollutants. In a crisis, simple filtration through cloth followed by boiling can remove most immediate dangers. Better still is having a gravity-fed water filter or portable purification tablets ready in your kit. By combining harvesting with purification, you create a renewable water source that is both safe and sustainable. Critics of rainwater harvesting restrictions often point out that these laws make little sense during emergencies. When public systems collapse, telling people they can't collect free water falling from the sky borders on absurd, yet in some areas, breaking those laws can lead to fines or even confiscation of your collection system. This means that, like other outlawed survival tactics, discretion becomes essential. A low-profile setup, such as barrels concealed behind fencing or using collapsible collection containers, can keep your water security from becoming someone else's target, whether that someone is a desperate neighbor or a patrolling official. Beyond personal survival, rainwater harvesting also has a psychological advantage. Knowing you have a source of water independent of government or infrastructure gives a sense of control in otherwise chaotic times. It's empowering to watch the rain fill your containers and know you've turned a natural event into a life-saving resource. That mental boost can keep you calm and focused when others are panicking. In the end, rainwater harvesting isn't just about defying questionable regulations. It's about reclaiming a basic human right. Water is life, and in a true survival emergency, the moral imperative to protect yourself and your family outweighs any peacetime restriction. When the sky offers you a gift, sometimes the most practical and most rebellious thing you can do is reach out and take it. Foraging for wild plants and medicinal herbs is an age-old survival tactic that has saved lives for centuries, yet in many regions, it's either heavily restricted or outright illegal. National parks, protected lands, and even some state-owned forests have strict rules against harvesting plants, fungi, or other natural resources. The official reasoning often revolves around conservation, preventing overharvesting, and preserving ecosystems for future generations. While these goals are valid under normal conditions in a life or death scenario, the moral equation shifts. The line between illegal and essential blurs when the alternative is dehydration, starvation, or untreated illness. In a survival situation, the ability to identify edible plants, berries, and roots can make the difference between enduring and perishing. Cattails, dandelions, wild onions, and pine needles are often abundant and can provide essential vitamins, calories, and even medicinal properties. Pine needle tea, for example, is rich in vitamin C and can help ward off scurvy, while plantain leaves can be crushed to make a natural poultice for insect bites or skin irritation. Mushrooms, though requiring extra caution due to poisonous look-alikes, can be a valuable source of protein and minerals if correctly identified. The challenge with modern restrictions is that they assume a functioning system of grocery stores, pharmacies, and medical care, systems that can collapse in an instant during a prolonged emergency. If you're miles from the nearest aid and you sprain your ankle, suffer from a fever, or run out of food, the wild can provide solutions that no law or regulation will deliver. The key is knowledge, having the skills to recognize safe plants, distinguish them from toxic varieties, and prepare them correctly. This is why pre-crisis training is so critical. In many cases, stealth becomes a survival necessity. Gathering at dawn or dusk, carrying your harvest in unremarkable bags, and avoiding obvious stripping of an area can prevent drawing unwanted attention. Even in rural communities, some people may be quick to report illegal activity if they see you picking plants in restricted areas. But in a collapse scenario, the real danger comes from other survivors who may be watching and waiting for a chance to take your gathered resources. Foraging also has a mental and emotional benefit. The act of finding food and medicine in the wild reinforces self-reliance and connection to the land. It turns panic into purposeful action and gives you the confidence that you can survive outside the boundaries of a broken system. There's a primal satisfaction in walking out of the woods with a handful of greens, berries, or medicinal herbs, knowing that you've outsmarted both nature's challenges and man-made constraints. Ultimately, outlawed foraging is about reclaiming ancestral knowledge that modern society has tried to regulate into oblivion. In times of peace, those restrictions might keep ecosystems healthy, but in true survival conditions, they can become barriers to your very existence. When the choice is between obeying a sign and feeding your family, survival will always tip the scales. Trading and bartering for essential supplies is one of the oldest forms of survival exchange, yet in many modern contexts, it can fall into legal gray areas or outright violations. In times of stability, selling or trading certain items without a license, especially things like firearms, ammunition, alcohol, prescription medicine, or even certain tools, can lead to serious legal consequences. Governments impose these restrictions under the justification of safety, taxation, and regulation. But in a true survival scenario, those rules become secondary to the urgent need for food, water, warmth, or medical aid. The reality is that when currency loses value or becomes inaccessible, barter becomes the lifeblood of community survival. In an emergency, the items you're willing to trade could be the very thing that keeps another person alive, and vice versa. You might exchange extra food for batteries, clean water for antibiotics, or firewood for warm clothing. In a prolonged collapse, bartering creates a network of mutual benefit when stores are empty, trucks have stopped delivering, and traditional markets have vanished. Unlike buying with cash, barter builds human connections, trust, and interdependence, something especially valuable when uncertainty is high. However, bartering during or after a disaster carries inherent risks. You're revealing that you possess resources, which can make you a target. This is why many experienced survivalists advise keeping a public stash of lesser value items specifically for trading, while keeping your most critical supplies hidden. Trading in small quantities also prevents you from appearing overly stocked, which could provoke suspicion or envy. In an unstable environment, desperation can quickly turn negotiation into confrontation, so location, timing, and discretion matter as much as the items themselves. Bartering also works best when you've thought ahead about what will be valuable during a crisis. Coffee, salt, sugar, toilet paper, water purification tablets, fuel, matches, lighters, and basic medicines are almost universally tradable. Even things like sewing needles, fishing line, or simple hand tools can be worth far more than their peacetime price. And while luxury items might seem frivolous, they can be powerful trade goods. In hard times, a bar of chocolate, a small bottle of liquor, or even cigarettes can boost morale and fetch a high value from those craving comfort or normalcy. In a regulated society, such exchanges might be frowned upon or considered illegal without the right paperwork. But in a scenario where law enforcement is absent or systems have collapsed, the barter economy is often the only functioning economy. The skill of negotiation becomes just as vital as the supplies themselves. Knowing when to hold firm, when to compromise, and when to walk away from a bad deal can mean the difference between survival and exploitation. Ultimately, bartering under outlawed conditions is about adaptability. Money is only worth something if people believe in it. When that belief disappears, value shifts to tangible goods and the skills to use them. Those who understand this before disaster strikes, and who prepare accordingly, will find themselves not just surviving, but thriving in the exchange-driven world that emerges from the ashes of collapse.